Welcome, everybody. This is SharePoint Weekly. It is 17th of February, and it is actually Sunday, which is precisely why we have the S on the background, right?
Because it is S for Sunday, yes.
S for Sunday, yes. So it's 17th of February. We're doing the recording on Sunday because I'm actually out of office next week, at least the start of the week, and then we want to keep on doing this weekly, right? If you do a commitment, you need to stick on the commitment, right?
And actually, the funny thing is that if I go back to when we planned to do the first episode, it never was that, let's try to make this big idea now. Like, let's do one. And then we did one, and then let's do another one. And here we are, 27. Yeah.
27 weeks later, which is actually a pretty nice achievement as well. Now, I was thinking this earlier today or whenever that it's going to be interesting to see how do we deal with the summer. Because both will have a family summer breaks at some point. So let's see how we organize that.
Also, if we can ask people to blog up front and then we can queue them up.
That's one way of doing it. So everybody who's watching the video, so what do you thought about?
Start thinking about your blog post for the summer and queue them up already. Then we can plan them up here, and then we will mention it there.
Yeah, sure. It is, by the way, a beautiful day in here. I have to do this. See.
Same here. Also sun.
Yeah.
Also sun.
Yeah. For me, it's slightly problematic. The big windows are directly on south, which means that the sun is now shining, pouring in, which is kind of a nice. But then you can't actually work because you can't see.
You can see anything. Yeah.
Exactly. Now. Because it's Sunday and obviously we both have family plans, let's try to keep this fast. But to be fair, we prepped this call already for 50 minutes for chit-chatting?
Well, prepped. We talked for 50 minutes.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Well, anyway, so is this actually work or, that's debatable anyway. So now, so what have you been up to for the past week? You've been busy. You've been slightly slower on the community side of things, right? Do you want to explain why is that, or it's just being busy on business?
Well, so a while back already, I had a change in my job. I do different things than I used to. In the past, I used to develop a lot. That was my primary thing to do. Now I don't. Now I think more about things like, what do we need to do? What kind of things customers have? And I think that over the last few months, I talked to more customers than I've done in my entire life, which shifts things, changes the way I work, but also is invaluable. The things that I've learned, it's like opened my eyes to many, many things that I just didn't know, because like the way we do things at PNP, we are so on the very cutting edge of things. We think about side designs and the next big thing and what's coming and SPFX 1 point, whatever is coming.
Yep.
And then I would talk to a customer who would just migrate to 2013 on-prem. That's their reality. And it's such a big reality check in a way. And also it exposes them to different kind of challenges and issues. But then on the other hand, there are people who are already going to the cloud and they think like, okay, so how do I govern? How do I keep track of everything that users can do nowadays in the cloud using things like Flow and Power Apps and Teams? So there are two extremes of where people are. And I get a chance to talk to them about challenges that they have, which is really invaluable and eye-opening. But that means also I code less. I code in the evenings and weekends, and I really try to keep. Yes, and I mean, it always has been
a hobby and a community, whatever the community and open source work is. But that's hobby, right?
I mean, I never see that as work. I see that as a thing that I love to do, and I love to create things from nothing. That's the reason why I code. It allows me to build new things. And CLI gives me, let's say, a really, really awesome excuse, if you like, to keep doing that every week. Right, because we had just this week. Actually, we had new person spending their time building up a new command for our CLI. So it's like to me, there's really nothing better than to welcome new person on board of our team in CLI. So that's really, really cool.
Yeah, I saw that absolutely, and that's really great. And also because you're a long-lasting MVP, you've been in a community for a long time. You're getting old. We need to get the new generation in.
What did I do? Is this the
well? There's some
right
gray
call?
hair in New York. There's some I can see gray spots. So,
Yeah, but that doesn't say anything, right? I mean, I've had a grade since I was 20 something. Nothing like a compliment from Wes on something.
Yes. Well, obviously, it's not an age thing. Anybody can do community open source regardless of the age. But it's great to actually, if you're not that experienced, have some more experienced people helping to get started and really helping people to understand the value and encouraging them to do this. Because as a new contributor or maybe a new person in a community, maybe a new person on SharePoint or CLI or NPM or whatever in open source, you need to have that good first experiences to get really back to it. And that's a really, really important thing. The community should embrace the versatility of the people contributing and different opinions as well. Because obviously the opinions are really good. We talked about this one in the context of something else earlier today with Waldek, but even though there might be opinions which do not agree with you on your direction or your thinking, that's actually insanely important and valuable, because that means that you need to rethink and reevaluate your message. Was this the right way? Did you present that in the right way? Could you actually get that person on your side if you'd explain your thinking in a more detailed way?
And also I think that there's also one step more or additional step in open source, right? Because if I think about how I used to work in the past, I would go to an office and I would see everybody. We would talk face to face. We were from the same kind of background, culture. We lived in the same place. In open source, we deal with people from all over the world. They have different background, different ways to communicate. What we might
language barrier.
Exactly. What might come through as offensive to me is just the way they are, and it's a perfectly fine way of doing things, right? So it's like you have to be really conscious, aware. You have to have the empathy and not always try to like have the first thing that is a negative way what someone else means. Like it you cannot default to that set of mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Because you don't know the person, you don't know their mood, you cannot see them. So the only thing you have there are the words that they typed on the screen, and you can
always interrupt them. You can that's the downside. Even on emailing, you can actually have. Well, I'm a Finn. My emails can be pretty brutal. But then if I read them every now and then, it's like, well, maybe I should have been more soft on the message to make it, because in Finland we're more on like, hey, we do stuff. We concentrate on doing, not on the fact that how you're doing today. It's not in the culture. I'm not going to start a discussion saying, hey, Waldek, so how are you doing today? Because for me it's like, well, why? Let's concentrate on making stuff happen.
Actually, the funny thing is that reminds me of, there was an article on LinkedIn shared by somebody comparing the Swedes, the Norwegian, Danish, and Finns. Yeah, it's like the cultural things of meeting, getting coffee, getting the buns, and then by the time everybody else had their meetings and chit-chats, Finns are already done doing the thing.
Yes. But it's a cultural thing, and that's what it is. Also for contributing in open source and helping people to contribute and helping people to be active. It's one of those. It's a great example of the diversity which we are in a global scale. You need to be inclusive. You need to understand that people are being different in their messaging. And sure, I've been now working for 13 and a half years in Microsoft, which is horrifying, actually. I never thought that I would be still here in Microsoft. Probably I thought about that anyway. But it's working in a US-based company. Obviously changes the messaging as well. And video obviously is different. Video is different because you can relate on a person. You can actually see that is he meaning what, messaging, comments in the GitHub issues or whatever. completely anonymous. You don't see the face. You can't relate on the person. Is he smiling? Is it a small smile? Is he angry? What was the tone of voice?
But I guess that is exactly why I think we invented or have emojis to add that emotion. And then someone said, yeah, but that's a juvenile thing to do. I mean, yes, you can see it that way. On the other hand, if the only thing that you write, if that's the only thing, if adding that one emoji there means that you can try to convey the emotion more clear, why not?
Yeah, that's true. But then be thoughtful about the emojis as well. Saying somebody that I don't like what you're doing in a strong way, and then having a smiley on the end is like, well, what do you mean with that?
Sarcasm doesn't go.
Sarcasm doesn't
on
work
social.
in a reading. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Or in emails, because there's no way for understanding is it sarcasm or not unless you explicitly call it out. So which is then eating up
the person.
Exactly.
And you know the person. You know, okay, he's probably, if he's saying that. Yes, that's.
Anyway, well, that was an interesting detail. But good discussion, actually. Quickly on just recapping on my side. Obviously, there's two big things which we are doing right now is the SharePoint Framework 1.8. So we're testing things. We're using, luckily, our MVP crew on some of the stuff as well. And then the second big thing, we had a strategic review last week with Jeff on the provisioning service, which is planned to go out. And we're still kind of polishing certain things out of that as well. I think that will be a huge thing. We've kind of built on that for quite a long time, and I know that there's a demand for it already. We're getting a lot of questions on when can we have this. The basic idea is that you can provision the Lookbook site to your tenant with the snap of a finger. So, and we'll get it out in matter of hopefully days. There's still ongoing things to polish, and
well, depending when you watch this recording, it might have already been out. There's always the nice time continue. Well,
that is true. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely agree on that. Because if we watch the video in, let's say,
2 years,
2 weeks, 2 years, or 5 years, who knows? It's definitely out already, and hopefully in 5 years it will be looking completely different. We have interesting visions around this work. Anyway, let's actually jump on the slides and have a discussion on things, and then get back on the.
You have slides?
Slides, whatever. It's Sunday. It's Sundays.
It's a sunny day. That it is.
It is a sunny day indeed. Let me share my screen. So let's jump on here. The first thing, actually, this was an ad hoc thing which I just added in here. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see Twitter. Your folder, Twitter.
Yeah. So this is
a lot of images.
I was actually I tweeted on this one on Friday. Kind of it's one of those things, the last day when you're heading to a vacation, it's always like doing a quick summary on what you've been doing and everything else. And even though I will be away for only for a few days, but still. And then I started thinking, I posted quite a few social media things on Friday as well. Then I went to this folder, I was like, 463 items. It was actually 458 on Friday. Now it's 463. But what are these? But these are basically the promos which we use for community promotions. There are so which we always build and create for the social media, which is, by the way, if you are running a community, if you're thinking on doing something similar, I would strongly recommend to get a visual identity and stick to it. Because one of the reasons why we do this, for example, for all of the social media announcements, is that you recognize the SharePoint Blue immediately. If it's in a Twitter tweet or in your mobile phones or whatever, you get that square and the colors and the way of messaging immediately. And then the right side is always evolving. It's basically changing based on the whatever we are then communicating, plus the relevant text there. But that helps for the people to see visually that's about the SharePoint. And if I'm interested in that, it will actually catch your eye. So that's a good practice related on communicating, actually.
So when would be the time for us to flip from the blue to let's say blue, the classic blue, to the modern teal?
Whenever our own design team says a green light or gives a green light for us. So we actually did that for a while in the community calls, and then we did fall back on the blue, and that was because our design team came back and said, "Don't do that yet."
Not yet.
Yeah. So be patient; it will happen, but not yet. Anyway, and kind of a funny discussion on this one as well. This is one of those things that if my kid is asking, what do you do for a living? Well, I trust.
I make pictures.
Yes. That's my job. Well, I do a lot of other stuff as well. Anyway, so let's go to the articles. Here we go. So this one was from Wertheimer, from Content and Code. Wertheimer is an MVP, pretty recent MVP actually. So it took a while for him to get the MVP. It was great that he's an MVP. And this is around debugging Microsoft Teams tab built with SharePoint Framework, which is in preview right now, starting from SharePoint Framework 1.7, goes to GA in 1.8, relatively soon. But basically, it's just a matter of explaining how do you do debugging on the Microsoft Teams development, and how do you run this, and how can you then do analyzing of the page and all of that stuff. Really valuable stuff as well. So how to do actually step-by-step debugging of the web part, which is hosted in Microsoft Teams. So really great stuff. Good. The next one was an interesting. We talked about this one before the recording as well. Deploy Google Analytics globally on modern SharePoint. Joao. I can't get this.
There you go. That was actually really good.
Joao.
I think. Thank you. As far as I can say.
I'm horrible in names. My brain can't remember them. Joao. He's an MVP as well, and contributing a lot on the community. Deploy Google Analytics globally on modern SharePoint. It's a nice article. References an example also, which is shared in a GitHub relating to how this would work. He's taking advantage of the tenant-wide extensions. Great capability. Whoever designed that and was the feature PM of that was just ingenious, right? He might be in this call now, but basically pushing then the Google Analytics to every single site on your SharePoint, and then you can get nice usage tracking. Why would you do this? Well, because in SharePoint we don't have a similar way of usage tracking as in the same level as Google Analytics, so kind of a valuable thing. On the other hand, well, obviously we will keep on evolving that, but it's in the priority queue on when does it get more love in the tasks. On the other hand of using this is that all of your URLs are basically then getting indexed, well, not indexed, but getting known by the Google as well. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. Is that a bad thing for your company or your partners? I don't know. It's up to people to decide what they want to do.
Well, I guess the interesting part there is that you don't really own the data anymore, right? So if you have a confidential site, confidential project, all of these URLs are exposed to a third-party service that you don't control, right? So as an alternative, you might think, for example, about App Insights, which you actually do control. If you want to remove the data, you can, right? And you can also have the rich things like custom metric, custom events. You can import that to Power BI for visual parts, right? So now, depending what you want.
Sure. Yeah. Are you saying that in the terms of usage for Google Analytics, you do not own the data? Google owns the data.
I don't know exactly
because I don't see that
usage for that.
So because when you think of it, I would assume that Google Analytics, I don't know, again, it's a speculative discussion, but you would assume that Google Analytics would give you the opportunity of deleting the data as well. So, but again, so I don't know. So.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if you ask me, it seems more native thing to me if you are on the Microsoft cloud to stay on the Microsoft cloud and have everything in single place.
True. And because then everything is under the same legal terms and
exactly.
You are already in Microsoft Cloud. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and also an additional thing that you get in App Insights, you get to choose in which geography the data is being stored, which you cannot do in Google, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. So there is a massive Google data center actually even in Finland, but I can't allocate my stuff to be hosted from there, and which you didn't know, by the way. So I don't know if Waldek actually knew, but no. There is one of their main data centers is in Finland.
Good for you.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, exactly.
Small snippets of information. Now, this one was interesting from Mikael Svensson. Locate pages where particular web part is being used on a modern SharePoint site. There is a small typo on the wording. I think the Finglish is contagious, so his English is turning to Finglish. No, just kidding. But basically, how could we identify where my web parts or out-of-the-box web parts are being used? And the easiest way to do that is by using a search. And he's using then the PMP. I'm going to actually zoom in. The PMP commandlets to actually execute a dynamic search query to SharePoint Online and then get a result out of where the web part is being used. I think that's actually pretty cool. Setup, and it also shows the power of community and open source projects. So technically you could use the same. CLI doesn't have yet a search query command. Or
it does. It does already for a few months. You're
cool.
Not paying attention to releases. Yes. It's okay. It's okay.
Good. But you can basically use CLI or PMP PowerShell on that. Yeah. So really cool. Andrew Connell, consider avoiding declarative permissions in Azure AD services and SharePoint Framework projects. And this really, let me scroll down, is really around this setup. So he's basically having a debate by himself or a discussion on himself on should you or should you not have the web API permission requests defined in the SPPKG file or not. And then if you're not aware, the question might be, well, where else would I actually have those permissions? And the answer is you can use PowerShell or CLI to define these permissions directly. And that wasn't the case in the 1.6 immediately. Those PowerShell and CLI support came slightly later. But basic idea, it wasn't there, or we didn't.
CLI had that support.
Oh, that's true.
Also, originally we used AAD directly, so we would modify directly the OAuth permissions in AAD. And then we we extended that to the official API.
Yeah. Anyway, but it's what am I trying to say? There's two ways of kind of thinking this. Having that permission in the SPPKG file means that the solution is self-containable. Basically, then you don't have to define a documentation. There's no administrative step to explicitly go to PowerShell and follow up on the documentation. What are the permissions which are needed? Now, having the permission in here will mean that it then has that message and it says basically go to the admin UI, approve the things, which is kind of slightly awkward as well, because what if somebody wants to use the solution immediately and that we haven't actually granted the permissions of the permissions at this point? So the web part will fail because the permissions haven't been deployed.
Yeah, but that's something that you would only see on runtime, right? So deployment time, it will be just fine. You will be able to run it. You will be able to do everything, and then you add it to the site, and it breaks, and then you have to be like, I missed something somewhere. But yes,
that's true. Now, already when we were designing this feature, but there was a long debate on do we actually want to have these requests in the JSON file, because in many cases enterprises will actually define the allowed scope separately, regardless of the solution. So basically, I was a big opponent, or my way of thinking this is that every single tenant administrator should consider which are those permissions which we allow our solutions to use in this tenant, and then we pre-configure them so they will be basically available, and then the permissions are there. Now, again, debatable. It's a cray. There's no cray.
Yeah, and also, so an interesting argument there. If you think about it, the way admins see is that they don't want to open up whatever you don't need upfront.
Correct.
Right. So even though you might know upfront, we are going to allow mail, calendar, and let's say search or something else.
Yep.
If there is nothing that needs it, I don't want to open it up yet. If there will be a request, I would allow it because we agreed that is acceptable for us, but we don't want to open it up front because there is nothing to use it yet. Yep. So chicken and egg.
Yep, it is. It's an interesting discussion, and it's a good kind of a decision to make knowingly. as a tenant administrator, what is the model which will be used in your tenant. So, and really important to understand how these things work, because absolutely Microsoft Graph is the API more and more to get access on the contextual information of the user. And that's where the interesting scenarios comes for the custom web parts as well, getting access on emails and tasks and everything else. So, which we have also some examples available as well. Now, on the next one, so this is from Elio. This is also being updated on the official documentations, which is really good, around how can you improve the locking as part of the build process for SharePoint framework. So what are you're able to add that additional messages in the build process as well. So really cool stuff, and it's great to get documented as well. This does not look good. Okay. In here, one thing what I noticed in here first was the icon. Ooh, cool. Somebody's using the. It's the Nertail icon already.
Yeah, and then if you move a little bit to the left, the upper left, you will see all three of them.
Oh yes, in here.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. That's nice.
So that is 2010, right? So the only one is there that is Moz.
That's true. Yeah, this is the Moz had its own. Oh, that was the squares. The
waffle, thing. Yeah, the office thing. Yeah.
Oh, we've been in this area for too long time. Remove SharePoint site from tenant. So this is around how would if you accidentally, this is a good example of a scenario, the marketing URL has already been taken. If you create a site, we will by default extend that with 2, which will then keep that a unique URL. And then if you want to, for example, delete that, what would be the steps of doing that? And basically a nice PnP PowerShell script, SharePoint Online PowerShell script, which is using then the creation of the site. So good story and good clarification why that might accidentally happen as well and how to clean it up. Handling JSON in Microsoft Flow. People are using obviously Flow a lot in the context of SharePoint. SharePoint is by far the biggest host, the Flow stuff, I would say, or at least from an enterprise user perspective. And this is a really nice article from Thomas showing how do you parse the JSON which is coming in and how to use those values then inside of the Flow, and step-by-step guidance and for example converting the HTML tables and all of that stuff. So really, really cool stuff. And it's good to reference if you are spending your more and more time on the Flow. And I think Flow usage is growing quite significantly, so which is understandable. It's a great product.
It is.
It's one of those Swiss Army knife kind of things. It's amazing what you can do with Flow. And how easily it is to connect things and all of that stuff. So really nice to see that it's catching that much attention.
Yeah.
And then the latest on this one. So
the latest.
The latest. So, okay, this is a joke. So, but it's. And we had a random chat with Waldek before the recording on blocking platforms and all of that. I'm considering moving my stuff away from MSDN block platform. This really old stuff, and and then I had a quick look on the views on my blog. Is it worthwhile to move? And this one was by far the most views. I think it was 220,000 views, which is actually pretty decent.
It is.
But I want to emphasize the fact that please do not use web templates, site definitions, XMLs anymore in SharePoint Online. Sandbox solution, declarative sandbox solution, don't do that. Yes, technically you can still use them, but it's not really meant to be used anymore in SharePoint Online. Save site as a template, don't do that. It's knowingly blocked for modern sites. It will bite you sooner or later if you start using that.
Well, and I guess that there's even the interesting thing, like should you even be using that on premises, right? Because like even though it still work perfectly fine, and there might be valid cases, you might even think, okay, I don't need it today, but what if tomorrow there will be a new CTO who's gonna say, we're going to go to the cloud. And you're like, oh, crap, we have all of that investments done in a way that we cannot move forward to the cloud. So then we have to reinvest again to rebuild all of that in a compatible way.
Yep, absolutely. But Yes, I would say we recommend people to use the remote provisioning techniques. In certain scenarios in on-premises, you can absolutely still use site definitions and web templates. Please use web templates rather than custom site definitions. There's a huge impact on that. Even though we're not going to deep dive on this classic discussion at this point. There are blog posts in my old blog explaining why you should not use site definitions as an example. But if you're in cloud or if you're thinking of moving to the cloud, or if you're in 2013, 2016 platform, the API surface is already so rich, and try to avoid the legacy old ways of customizing SharePoint, which will cause you additional harm sooner or later. Even though you would be not willing to spend time on learning what would be the thing which will bite me in 2 years, trust me, trust us.
We've been there,
Yes,
there,
exactly.
done that.
And it's going to be costly, and it's going to be painful. But it's kind of an ironic thing that I was checking the blog post and my blog post, and obviously all of my old XML ways of customizing SharePoint are by far the most viewed.
You're like, oh, no.
And now I'm basically saying, do not use that.
Yeah.
But that's the thing.
All of the time and effort that went into doing the research, blogging that, and you're like, if only back then I knew. Yeah.
No, well, at the time it was the right way to do it. But it's if you think about SharePoint 2010, it's now 2019. It's 10 years ago. So in 1 decade, we've moved away from that model to a modern ways of doing customization. Yeah. So let's try to go forward from the old models. And obviously for me, knowing the pain and knowing the deep insights of the XML structures, because I was the one who actually owned this in the master certification program even. We had a 1 day full of XML deep dives in the master certification program for SharePoint. And it was actually fun. I could still talk that thing eyes closed, 18 rotations. So, but it's the fact that I know exactly what happens on server side actually helps on then avoiding these pitfalls in the future around that we don't do similar mistakes like web templates or the fabulous 40. And we should not say that out loud. But
a kitten died, right?
Yes, exactly. But it's. And that's why we want to use the remote provisioning techniques. That's why the provisioning service, which we've talked about a long time, which will go live, is a future-proven way of doing customizations rather than something which is causing you harm in a long run. So,
yeah, because I guess that in the end you have to see it in a way that you don't want to have dependency on something that has to be somewhere, like a reference to an asset or a template or anything. Like you
Correct.
Just want to set things up the way you want them to be using what is available out of the box and then have it work and not have like, I'm going to put template here, then I will create 200 sites, and if I remove the template, all of them break because they cannot like.
Yes,
it doesn't work that way.
That's precisely the main issue with the XML-based customizations. And that's why we want to get out of it. So, and the remote provisioning techniques, they basically are the same as end user would be clicking through things.
Yeah.
So it's exactly as somebody is manually uploading a file and then doing configurations and all of that. And that's why the remote API ways of customizing SharePoint or whatever system actually is a better way than doing the old classic templating structure.
So actually, we should be explaining that as creating macros for your sites.
Kind of, yeah.
Yes. Because it is the recording button, and then you just go through it, right?
That is actually true. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting way of thinking that. Now, so any thinking points for next week? I'll be out of office. I'll be potentially working on Friday, but that's. I'm going to be swimming and being on Angry Birds Park and all of that stuff. So.
Good for you. So I will be still here behind my screen. I think, like, if I think about what we are doing for the CLI, we have things around labels coming up, and we have things about site design because there are quite a few interesting things around that, like applying a large site design requires different approach than if it's a smaller one because of the size and all
timing,
that.
So, yeah.
Exactly. So we have a few things aligned around that. And another thing is I've been discussing with Bob Sherman the latest ability to create teams based on templates. Yep. And if I'm not mistaken, there's a way to create team using a template, but there is not a way to extract a template by yourself, or there is no API for that.
Yeah.
So you create template by yourself, and then you can apply it, but there's no way to get a template from a side.
Extract.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. And so Bob and I had a discussion on in repo around how you would go around it and how would you do that.
Yeah. Absolutely, and obviously on the PnP PowerShell side as well, and in general in the PnP, the engine side of the things, we're looking into doing the extraction and apply of themes quite soon as well, and getting that on the CLI is absolutely really great thing as well. The themes has such a big role, obviously in the Office 365, and it's growing all the time. The usage of themes is growing, so getting a support to a functionality where we actually provision multiple site collection and then themes and associate those in an automated way makes perfect sense. Absolutely.
Yeah, but I guess it's the whole thing, right? We've been doing pre-configured sites for a long time now. I think already
decades.
Exactly. Teams is new, and they are getting to the place where, okay, so I can create a team, but what if I need that to have this tab, because there are terms of use, there are whatever things you want to have in a team already, and they're like getting basically to the point where we are already a pre-configured team that is ready to use, and not like create team. Oh yeah, and then you need 20 other things to do.
Yep, absolutely. Cool. I think that's pretty much it for this week. So I will, we have other plans for the afternoon, obviously, with family. So but we'll have a new SP Dev Weekly coming up then in a normal schedules on the week of 25th of February, and we'll record that on Monday. We'll still having discussions with the visitor on that one, but for this one, we didn't want to actually invite
we might have a mystery guest.
Yes, exactly. For this one, it was a Sunday recording, so we didn't want to actually bother anybody because that's not fair. Yeah. But thank you for watching. Please give us feedback. What did you like? What's good? And if there's any visitors who you would like to see in these, let us know as well. We can probably get we'll try to get anybody who you are requesting on this calls, and use the hashtag SPDevWeekly if you want your articles being mentioned in here, being covered in the weekly calls.
And like you can already expect people saying like, yeah, let's get Jeff Tipper or Omar or Adam. It's like, oh my god.
Well, we can try. Adam is my skip manager, so theoretically doable. Obviously, the challenge of that one is just the timings. Those guys are really busy.
Yes.
And Omar is my skip manager, and then Jeff is my skip manager, or something like that. So. And I know that Jeff is watching this every now and then, and he really enjoys seeing how the SharePoint community is being active and inclusive and helpful and positive. So it's not too far-fetched that we might actually even get Jeff at some point, but it's timing. So we'll see.
All right. On that, I wish you a really great week off, or a piece of week off. Enjoy the time, regenerate, re-energize, and I will see you somewhere next week, I guess.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.